You built a framework. It worked. For a week, maybe a month, the output came back sounding like you, and you stopped dreading the blank page. Then something changed. The results got a little worse. You started fixing the output again, and if someone asked you what went wrong, you couldn't point to anything. The framework is the same document it was the day it worked. Here's what actually happened. The framework didn't break. The world around it moved, and the framework stayed still. That has a name. It's called drift, and it happens to every framework ever built. Today I'll show you the 3 ways it happens, why you never see it coming, and the one question that tells you whether it's already happened to yours. First, the part nobody tells you. Frameworks don't fail because they were wrong. A framework that worked on day 1 was right on day 1. It encoded your standards, your context, and your reasoning as they existed at that moment. The problem is that a framework is attached to a surface, and the surface keeps moving. The AI model you use gets updated. The kind of work you feed it shifts. Your own standards evolve because you evolve. Every one of those movements opens a small gap between what the framework assumes and what's actually true. A framework is a snapshot of your judgment. Judgment ages. So the question was never whether your framework would drift. The question is which kind of drift you're living with right now. There are 3. Drift mode 1, tool drift. The framework stayed the same and the AI underneath it changed. Models get updated constantly, and each update shifts how instructions get interpreted. The phrasing that routed perfectly 6 months ago lands differently today. You wrote rules tuned to one model's habits, and that model doesn't exist anymore. Same document, different reader. If your framework suddenly got worse without anyone touching it, this is usually the one. Drift mode 2, input drift. The framework stayed the same and your work changed. You built a client communication framework when you had 5 small clients and quick, friendly threads. Now you have 2 large clients, longer threads, more people copied on every message. The framework still says 3 sentences maximum, and you override it every single time because the rule was written for work you no longer do. The framework isn't wrong about the old work. It's just never met the new work. Drift mode 3, context drift. The framework stayed the same and you changed. The standards you encoded were your standards at the time. A year later, you've raised the bar. You've developed instincts the document has never heard about, and you read your own framework like it was written by a younger, slightly less experienced version of you. Because it was. Nothing around the framework moved. You outgrew it. 3 modes. The tool changed, the work changed, or you changed. Most drifting frameworks have at least 2 of these going at once, and every framework you own is drifting in at least one of them right now. Now, why didn't you notice? Because you were watching the wrong thing. When you work, your attention is on the output, the email that needs to go out, the analysis that's due. You judge each result on its own, fix what needs fixing, and ship it. Nobody reviews the framework because the framework isn't due today, and the signal is small. Drift never announces itself. It shows up as slightly worse results, a little more editing than last month. A faint skepticism when you load the framework, a voice in the back of your head that says, "I'll probably need to fix this anyway." Each of those edits felt like a one-off. String them together and they were a pattern. By the time you consciously notice, you've been working around your framework for weeks. You quietly became the patch between the document and reality, and the patch became the job. So here's the test. 1 question. When was the last time you used this framework and shipped the output without modifying it? If you can name a recent time, the framework is holding. If the answer is, "I don't know," or if the honest answer is, "I touch it every time," the framework has drifted. Your own editing is the evidence. Every correction you make is a measurement of the gap between what the framework produces and what you actually need. Ask it about every framework you own. It takes about a minute, and the ones that fail the question will surprise you. Here's the reframe that matters. Your framework didn't fail. What failed is something most people never built at all: the maintenance loop. The habit that catches drift while it's still small and folds what you learned back into the document. Construction is the part everyone teaches. Maintenance is the part that decides whether your library compounds or quietly rots. The good news is that the maintenance loop is faster to run than the framework was to build. Minutes, not hours. That's the next video. A working loop that turns every edit you make into a permanent upgrade. Before you watch it, run the one question across your library. Count how many frameworks fail. That number is the size of the opportunity.